Star Wars. I'm pretty sure you've heard of it. Widely renowned as one of the behemoths in the entertainment industry, Star Wars has always been a staple throughout the times, ever since it first attracted a general populace way back in 1977. While despite its most recent establishments having been proved to be divisive at most, it still has remained a pop culture juggernaut to this day. I mean, if you want to count all the endless barrage of films, TV shows, games, or any spin-off format really, there is simply no stopping this sci-fi epic from fading away anytime soon. However, there is one thing that the franchise hasn't really tackled until now, and that of course is prevalent to anime. And that is a subject we'll be talking about in this video. That's right, in due part to the Visions anthology now available to stream on Disney Plus for over a month now, I have decided to rank each of these episodes and deciding which ones are considered to be from the worst to the best. Side note, this is my personal take on this matter, so for any counter opinions you may have when watching this video, feel free to subjugate it down in the comments below. Also, major spoilers if you haven't seen them all yet. Now, let us begin forth. Kicking off our list is with Tatooine Rhapsody, a Studio Colorado project that centers itself around a rock band. And that's basically it, really. Okay, so there is a plot line in which the main character is on the run from the Order 66 massacre, in which he then bumps into a hot-looking guitar player who is also on the run from his father. Can you guess who the dad is? And so they formed a band and have been touring around Tatooine ever since, only for the latter to get captured and get sent back to Jabba. And while the main lead does sort out to save him from his apparent fate, the situation immediately gets resolved just by showing up and attempting to play something that would appease the antagonist enough to prevent it. And really, that's all there is to it. Honestly though, out of all the short films that I've seen in this anthology, this is the one that I feel is the most underwhelming, hence why it's ranked at the bottom. It just didn't really click with me all that much, hence I didn't really care as to what was even happening. I mean, all that I know about the main lead is that he used to be a Jedi Padawan, and that he likes playing music, and that's all you know about him for the entire run. Okay, I know it sounds like I'm just nitpicking here considering that this is only a 13-minute run, but I just wish there could have been more to it than that. Like, give a proper reason as to why the main lead decided to join the band in the first place, or how his heritage might actually be served as a plot point in the story, because, you know, he used to be on the run as a Jedi fugitive, but did he ever get captured for that simple reason? Well, you might as well write a fanfic for that one because I don't know how it will turn out. It was an okay experience overall, though I highly doubt that many people, including myself, will tend to remember it by after watching. It's just not really that memorable. Although, if there's one thing I can give this one short props for, it's arguably the climax when the band starts to play out in front of the entire audience in the pod race circuit. And yes, this is actually a raceway, in case you haven't seen Phantom Menace. And in my opinion, it's really not that bad. The song itself, it's got a catchy punk beat to it, the lyrics are both uplifting and groovy, and since it mainly serves as the main highlight of this entire film, I'd say it's done its job pretty rather well. So feel free to listen to it on repeat as soon as you bring this short to a close. Though if you've listened to it while dubbed in English, well, good luck trying to plug your ears out, because it is not going away, buddy.
A Jedi!
Now, here's one in particular who is a bit of a special case, since it's meant to be served as the final project by a well-known director called Masahiki Utsuga, whom, if you don't know, has taken part in one of Trigger's many well-known shows in between. And what do you know, it's also helmed by the exact same studio. Although, it rarely ever feels like one. To start off with, both in its animation and art direction, it feels like you're watching something more akin to an American cartoon, and while I can give props to that in some cases, it ends up giving off less of a vibe that you're watching a Japanese animation production, and it really doesn't help that the art style at times can feel very bland as a result. The narrative, on the other hand, it doesn't do much to stand out with that scenario either. It simply follows a Jedi Master and his Padawan as they sense a disturbing presence in the Force nearby a foreign planet. There, they decided to arrive on said planet in order to investigate said presence, and during that, they soon discovered that said presence was actually an elderly Sith Lord. It's right there in the title. So the Padawan finds him first, and then he gets fatally wounded. The mentor soon finds them afterwards and faces the elderly Sith in the final duel, and then he kills them, which thus brings to the film's conclusion. Okay, so hear me out. I know that just sounded very vague when describing the entire summary of the short, but to be honest, the climax during the fight felt pretty timid in comparison. Now, to put it lightly, this is just a simple story that involves a slight crisis that requires some hints of mystery intrigue in order to resolve it, but all in all, in the end, it didn't really leave that much of an impact in me. Though I do like the chemistry between the student-mentor dynamic, as they help to establish their relationship with one another, with the support of the script's natural dialogue, as well as them setting up certain scenes that amplifies the mystery of it all. Though, not by a long shot, mind you. Plus, it even has some sense of closure in which the student learns a valuable life lesson soon after they defeated the central antagonist. So yeah, I guess that adds some bonus points in my book. So in conclusion, I was pretty okay with this one. Though again, it's really not anything to write home about like the last one. Now here's a certain film in which I felt got the most underhanded solely due to its plot substance, and that award goes to TOB1. Now in regards to its production value and visual direction, thanks to its efforts helmed by Science Saru, I'd say it stands out as one of the most unique looking amongst its counterparts. Both in its art direction and character designs, it really gives off the mood of the post-Astro Boy aesthetic, except now it's gone itself a fresh coat of paint and it manages to keep that art style pretty consistently throughout its entire run. And during its highly animated moments, it even manages to keep a more sincere continuity that prevents the short from getting dragged on in the process, so I can give props to that. While it is pretty easy on the eyes, the narrative is, well, very rushed in comparison. While it does follow a robot boy created by whom was once a Jedi Knight and is now a robotics professor who one day dreams of becoming a Jedi Knight himself and exploring the cosmos, the situation is put in which he accidentally triggered a signal warning that lets one of the Sith Lords know where both he and the professor are, and that said professor hides CEO in protection only for him to die in the aftermath, and in which it brings the acknowledgement that the little android now has to take care of himself and sort out his mentor's dream by becoming said Jedi. While that does seem cathartic, I felt as if it was just getting to a certain point in which the film could lead itself to a more interesting direction, such as the reasoning behind T.O.'s creation, only for that to get sidelined so that way our protagonist gets to fight the main villain of the story just to serve itself as the main highlight of it all. And while it is a pretty good fight, in fact it's one of the most well animated ones in the entire anthology, it got settled down to the bit where that this was decided as to what the plot was going for this whole time, which in return left me very mixed as a result halfway through. Also, while I did mention the art was good, the animation itself felt as if it got cut at certain moments, where to the point it felt like I just had a hint of whiplash in the process, so there's that at least. In conclusion, this is one of these cases in which I felt it could have brought more to the table, like maybe give a more fleshed out dynamic between T.O. and the professor so that way I can give more of a damn about the latter's death. But regardless of that, I would say that this had a much more better fare than the last two did, so in the end I guess I shouldn't ask for too much and just enjoy the ride. Not terrible by any means, it just wasn't that great as much as I hoped it would. So now that we're getting into the more meat and grindy parts of the ranking, aka the 6th to 4th placements, aka the mid-tier section, aka things are definitely going to be more interesting from here on out. And to start off, we have our 6th ranking, the Ninth Jedi. So to start off, here is how the summary goes. It begins with 7 masterless Jedi who are on the run during the Empire's reign, in which they are all gathered in a somewhat ancient-looking space temple? Yeah, that's what it's called, I guess. Whilst aided by a mysterious entity named Juro, informing them of his plan to restore the Jedi Order. Meanwhile, down on the planet below lies a young girl named Kara, who is on the chase by hunters who elicits her father, whom, by the way, is a blacksmith, for manufacturing lightsabers for the said Gathering Jedi. Now this premise alone is a rather engaging scenario to go down by, and from what I gathered while watching this short, it was executed pretty damn well. Both in its pacing and build up to the climax of the film, they managed to bring about just the right moment to elevate its status above its other counterparts. Plus I love the twist at the end when it turns out that the Gathering Jedi actually turns out to be the Sith, because to be honest, I did not see that one coming, and with that comes a very well animated lightsaber sequence. Oh, and did I not mention that the visuals in the short are pretty outstanding too? Props to Production IG for handling this one, by the way. However, despite my praises on this one so far, why is it in 6th place? Well, it's because while the plotting of the scenario is well suited out, the problem that comes with it is that it only leaves a slight impact on you, because what I mean by that is that when you're watching something and that was like this one big plot twist scenario that brings about the inner shock within you, in which you are supposed to be either bewildered with what just happened or get induced with sheer excitement, instead it just left me with this feeling of being like, cool, I guess this is happening now. I don't know, I guess I wasn't really that invested into it as much as I hoped it would. Now, when did I say that before? Still though, I did have a good time with this one, and from the looks of the ending, it might just seem possible that they're actually going to make this one as a full-fledged series. Then again, it might just end up being a pipe dream, because this is based on an IP owned by a mega multimedia corporation. But, we can wish though, right? If you felt like you got Masaki Yuasa vibes from watching TLB1, well, you might be considering that even further when watching Akakiri, since this is yet another Science Sorrow production. Except it's not really directed by Masaki Yuasa himself. That honor goes to Yoon Young Choi, and since viewing upon what she has put into her vision for this one, I can say with no doubt that she's got a very promising career ahead of her, even though she has already made it at some point. This is by far the most darkest of the entire anthology, although I wouldn't say dark to the point where you'd likely be traumatized by the likes of Devil May Cry Baby as pure sample. Regardless, I really like the direction it was handled with, both in terms of its story and plot development. Centering around a fugitive Jedi named Tsubaki, who has been suffering from visions of an unforeseeable tragedy awaiting him, he's been given a task along with his reunited Lord Love / Princess Misa to overthrow the royal palace that has been taken over by the Empire. Now, what I actually like about this short in particular is that despite its shortened time length, it manages to gather enough insight for our main duo to bring about their entire character arcs to a full circle. Tsubaki especially is a worthy example for that, since his whole arc, while not being fully explored entirely, manages to elevate the short to a completely different mood from what it's supposedly established as. One detail that actually supports this is when you start progressing further and further into the narrative, and that detail can be what many people would describe that aspect as the use of color. To explain what I mean, let's take a look back at the final scene of the short. So by the time when our main lead is getting backed up into a corner, you'll notice that there are some hints of red colored throughout the entire scene. Now, if you think about it, what images come exactly when you think of the word red? If the image you're thinking currently is about passionate lust, well then you might need to ease off a bit, buddy, but you're not exactly wrong either. In this scene, this use is clearly meant to represent the imminent change our lead is about to go through, and once you've already seen what's about to happen, then you know it's not going to be pretty either way. Whether if that red is shown in our main lead's eyes or just to cover an entire landscape of it, you'll realize just how much of the technical aspect being used to signify the inevitable tragedy to come. And that is something that's really difficult to pull off without making it seem glaringly obvious, because in the end, you'll soon find that nothing is going to go well in our lead's favor, and that is a bold move which in my opinion has paid off brilliantly. Okay, so this one is arguably my biggest surprise out of the whole shtick, because when I looked at the production studio behind this short film, well, here's how it played out. Okay, so who animated this short again? What is it? Geno Studio? Who the hell is that? Oh, so that's what they made! Wait, don't tell me that they even— Oh, dear God, why? I don't want to go through this again! So in regards to how the short came into being, it was interesting to learn that the director behind this film, Yuki Igarashi, was able to input many different elements into what conforms the setting of Star Wars, while also embedding it with the traditional style of Japanese animation. Thus leading the background art being completely hand-drawn with exquisite detail, the design choices that elaborates on both the structural buildings and landscapes, as well as the character design, and most importantly, the fluidity in both of its characters and action being brought to life be the most expressive animation you'll ever see in this anthology. So it definitely shows when it comes to that compartment. I was just blown away by how visually stunning everything is. Like, it's pretty astounding at just how seamless it all feels, yet it even manages to keep it intact at the same time. The story is also pretty engaging as well, centering around a humanoid bunny girl named Lop who ran away from a slave trade only to run into the clan leader along with his daughter called Ocho, in which she decides to adopt the youngling into the family. Then, 7 years pass by, and it's all downhill from there, as the clan's home planet is now in an imminent exploitation, all thanks to the Empire, because of course they're always up to no good. So the one thing that I got me hooked throughout this entire short is that the theme that is presented throughout is that it mainly centers around the idea of family, where in which no matter where life takes you, whether it's your choice or not to take a different path from your relatives, and even if you aren't blood related, your family will always be a part of you, and it's always something that many people will remember by, no matter what source of entertainment they consume. I really am glad that I enjoyed this short, because it really just goes to show how much the effort the team at Geno is willing to bring this animation to life. I mean, who would have thought that they would have started this to now making this? But of course, it doesn't exactly come without its flaws either, such as when you have some sudden moments that does feel particularly rushed throughout, though thankfully it's not as rushed to the point where it can nearly take you out of the experience like with TOB1. Also, and okay, I know this might sound a bit elaborative, but during the final climax between the two sisters, there was a moment in which Lop seemingly dealt Ocho a death blow, and here's what happens next. How did she survive that? She's acting like it didn't even faze her in the slightest, yet you can literally see the X mark on her front suit, and yet she's being all like, just put a flesh wound. But regardless from that specific plot hole, I really do like this episode. Even the main bunny girl, which, now that I think about her, it's... oh god, the internet's already gazed upon her presence, haven't they? But moving on from that, it is now time for us to see what our rankings will be in the top 3, shall we? Ah yes, the one show that is known for having the least amount of action and supposedly excitement amongst the anthology. But to be fair, it would make sense to have at least one episode that is mainly dedicated to the craft of both its characters and world building, rather than focusing on what is supposedly happening to its characters, aka the plot. And considering how high it's on this list, I'd say that it's a no-brainer that it has a lot more to it than that. What makes The Village Bride great in my opinion is that compared to the rest of the other episodes, it doesn't really focus on the scenarios at hand, but to rather explore the context behind it. Case in point, you are mostly watching the characters living out their lives, affiliating with the situation at hand. Add to that its surreal atmosphere and thematic music, which by the way is composed by none other than the well-established Kevin Penkin, and it ends up giving off this ethereal tone while setting up the conflict within the narrative, leaving it off with a spectacular payoff. It's really no wonder as to how Kinema Citrus has created such an authentic short, that in which when you compare it to most other installments in this anthology, they usually revolve around a certain atmosphere that makes you want to go on a grand scale adventure, but The Village Bride does something differently. It makes you want to take a back seat and see how it plays out with its world and characters while letting the action be on the sideline until its climactic showdown. To be honest, there's really nothing much else I can say other than to convince you to go watch it, because once you see how it plays out, you will definitely understand why. Henceforth, this is one of my personal favorites in this entire anthology. But don't forget, we still got 2 more to go. Now here's an interesting fact for those of you unaware. Did you know that one of the biggest inspirations that led George Lucas to creating this juggernaut of a sci-fi franchise was simply by watching classic samurai films helmed by Akira Kurosawa? Well, if you haven't, then tough luck, because I have a bigger brain than you. That fact has been said many times throughout its history that it's almost become commonplace at this point. And it's pretty baffling to notice that we never even got close to see a samurai-influenced film set in the Star Wars universe. Until now, that is. And lo and behold, may I introduce our second highest ranking, The Duel. This could be the closest thing we'll ever get to a classic Japanese-themed Star Wars flick. And the fact that it was handled by Kamikaze Douga, the studio responsible for both the JoJo openings and the severely underrated Batman Ninja movie, they absolutely hit it out of the park on this one. The narrative is both straightforward yet enthralling, the pacing is really well thought out, its presentation and setting really helps to signify its own identity as a camaraderie to the classic Ronin films, and most important of all, the action and camera work in this are sublime. Plus, who doesn't enjoy watching a wandering lone warrior slicing up bad guys as he goes into multiple towns along the way? It's a classic tale that still commemorates its badassery to this day. Oh, and also the main antagonist uses multiple lightsabers as a spinning umbrella of death. So if that doesn't convince you to watch the short, then I honestly don't know what will. Sure, it's a bit lighter on the more storytelling side, but who can really give a damn when you're having two Sith Lords duking it out on each other? Oh, I'm sorry, did I not mention that the main protagonist in this actually used to be a Sith Lord? Now he's just collecting the lightsaber remnants of the comrades he's defeated? Okay, going off topic for a bit now that we're on the subject of this matter, when I first watched this, I did not know that there was these crystals that are used to power up the lightsaber, so that's an interesting part of the Star Wars lore, I guess. Even though it was never fully explained in the movies. But in any case, I had tons of fun watching it, which in case thus bringing it to my most second favorite short of this anthology. Which means we are bringing this ranking to a close with none other than... Yep, that's right folks, out of all the short films that I've seen in this entire anthology, this is easily my most favorite of the bunch, and it's not hard to see why. So to summarize this, the story revolves around two bioengineered twins, whom are purposely being created to serve who else? The Galactic Empire. However, the twin brother, who serves as our main lead, plans to leave the fleet while bringing a certain saber crystal that has the capacity to overpower any other lightsaber. Meanwhile, the twin sister has already caught on to the act, which thus leading it to an inevitable duel of, shall we say, epic proportions. While it's certainly malleable on the surface, it does give us some of the most noteworthy setups in this entire anthology for the big fight, thanks to its showcasing of how the scenario is presented, as well as demonstrating its no backbones attitude, which reassuringly fits in with the rest of the short like a perfect layer on a cake. And the animation and direction during this fight is what I would call a major Sakuga fest. It's got one of the most bombastic lightsaber scenes you will ever see. It is, by far, some of the most coolest stuff you will ever feast your eyes on. And that courtesy, of course, is given to the well-renowned Studio Trigger. And it's also well-renowned director of Gurren Lagann fame, Imayashi Hiroyuki. I could just talk about this all day long, because this basically demands all sorts of rewatchability. Whether it's a simple analysis as to how they managed to create such a marvelous spectacle, or you just want to watch a guy literally slicing an entire Starship Destroyer simply by borrowing that one moment that quadrupled The Last Jedi's reputation for the rest of its remaining runtime. Which, depending on your outlook on the film, might be for better or for worse. But for the twins, oh, it was glorious. This is essentially everything I want out of a Star Wars anime, and I was given every single moment of it, and I couldn't be happier without it. So whether you're interested into watching a sci-fi-esque anime extravaganza, or you're just wondering about what is even the big deal out of Star Wars, because let's face it, it's pretty much buried itself deep down into the public eye already, this would be my most definitive recommendation. And with that, I hereby bring this ranking video to a close. Well, that was a surefire way to end things off now, wasn't it? Once again, this is my personal take on which installments I view to be the ones worth watching, but then again, it's just to have some fun along the way as well. If you like the video, then click the button to do so, and also subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of what I have to offer. See you all soon.